I want to go through just a little bit of who I am and what I've done in the past in the industry. We'll do a little bit of that, and then we'll move on to talking about a couple of things. First of which is, what is a day-to-day like for a game development artist? And then we'll move on to how artists can work with programmers effectively. We could talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap things up with a Q&A. So yeah, let me move on to the introduction. Where am I at here? Yeah, so my name is Ryan Lastimosa. I am an art director and a game dev consultant. I've been in the industry for roughly 20 years, almost 25 years now. The majority of my time has been in AAA game development with some work done in feature film visual effects. Here is a list of some of my socials. So if you'd like to get into contact with me or reach out to me or see what I'm up to, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, Instagram, or you can check out my Beacons page where it has a handful of other links there. So I'm glad to connect. If you'd like to connect through LinkedIn, I'm totally cool with that. Yeah, I interact with a lot of people on LinkedIn all the time. So it's a really good tool to have for networking and for communication. So let me talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I've done in the past. So yeah, like I stated before, I've been in the industry for roughly close to 25 years. I've worked on a handful of titles that I'm really proud of. I've worked on some good films, and I've worked on a handful of not so good films. When we're not recording, I could tell you guys about those later. But I've worked on some titles that I'm immensely proud of, and some of these that I show here are some of the things that I'm proud of working on. Yeah, I've done a lot, in game dev and film. I've been around the world in a bunch of like crazy locations, on set and on location. I've worked with some of the best and brightest teams all throughout my career, and it's crazy because it keeps you young, but I still feel like I'm just getting started with the industry. Going into like a little bit of a background of where I started. I started school. I started at the Art Institute of Los Angeles in 1999. Yeah, back in 99. And I graduated roughly around 03. Halfway through school, I was already working in the industry, and it was interesting because, I was just very close to dropping out, but luckily the school told me, hey, we can issue you credits based on the work that you've done in feature film. So, work and school for me was just, full-time, planes, trains, and automobiles. It was like a few 72-hour days, working on a particular project and then flying to a set on location, like overseas somewhere, creating 3D for that set, and then, rinse and repeat and doing it all over again. But what I want to like kind of get into is tell a little story about school and how things started for me getting into the industry. As you can see here, I have like some images of just some candid stuff from on the set or on location for the Chronicles of Narnia, for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then we have stuff for The Day After Tomorrow, and then Too Fast, Too Furious. I was working on that, and then the Chronicles of Riddick. This is what it looked like for the majority of time that I was working in film. It was just like a bunch of dinky, like offices with a computer in it. This is way before we even had flat screens. This is CRT monitors that we had to like haul into, different like temporary labs and stuff. And then, we were on set sometimes for, film shoots. We would have to get reference photography. Then we would have to scan a particular set in 3D and then rebuild it in Maya, then hand that off to production. Or, we would have to go to like the actual filming set, take some reference photography for textures and things like that. This right here was for the Chronicles of Narnia. Have any of you seen that film, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Okay, the battle scene at the very end? This was what we did was we scanned the battle scene, like the arena where the battle took place. It had to be 3D, or it had to be scanned in 3D and then modeled because of all the CG creatures that were in that scene. We had to match it up to the camera plates. So that's what took us on location there. Um, my first gig in the industry was with X-Men 2, and X-Men 2, X-Men United was at first it was presented to me as why don't you build this set and then see how accurate it can make it. And little did I know that when I was opening up this file, it's like, hey, this thing kind of looks familiar. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, wait, this is like from X-Men. This is Cerebro. So have any of you seen X-Men 2 here? Yeah. So Stryker Cerebro and the original Cerebro as well, that was done in 3D. And a lot of the film plates had to get matched to the 3D camera. So that's why it was rebuilt in 3D. And as you can see here, this is some of the geo that I created specifically for this shot. Now, multiple artists, tech directors, material artists, animators worked on this. So in feature film production, you have like, hundreds to maybe a couple of thousand people that are working on any particular shot at one time. I was lucky enough to get in and work on this set when the set was actually completed and done filming, and I had to recreate it in 3D and hand that off to production. So that was an actual like fun project to work on, as one of my early projects that I worked on. And throughout my career, I've been able to work on a lot of like fun films. Like the last one I worked on was Aeon Flux here with Charlize Theron. Batman Begins was a blast as well too. Did a lot of our filming out in Chicago. Worked on a lot of stuff there, and overall, like I never thought I would ever like have like this many films under my belt. I just thought that maybe I can just work on one film, and then maybe that would be like the thing that would I could check that box, like have my name and credits and check that box and say like I did it. But then after you do it once, you just keep doing it over and over again, and then all of a sudden you find out that it's like, yeah, you're contributing to an industry. But I had one problem with working in the film industry at my young age. I was roughly around between 22 and 25 years old. I was in the film industry roughly. My work-life balance was absolutely horrible. I worked a lot, and that was just me wanting to get after it. That was just me wanting to get after the next contract or wanting to get after the next project. It just kept coming and coming and coming. So I decided to like kind of break things up a little bit by not just working in the industry, but also teaching on the side. So while I was working contracting in film, I was also teaching at the same time. And what happened was there was one day I was teaching a class. I was teaching a 3D class at the Art Institute of San Francisco. And I had a handful of students. Right before a final, they downloaded and installed Call of Duty 2 into the computer lab. So I walked in and I was talking to some of the students, like, what the hell are you guys doing? You guys installed you guys installed software into the computer lab, and you didn't even invite me. It's like, come on, guys. The thing was, I knew they were going to finish their project. I knew that this crew or this team was on point because they were some of my top students. I told them like, hey, I know you guys need to blow off some steam, and this game just came out. Like, yeah, take a few hours. Take a few hours, let's play. And what happened was I canceled the class. We ordered pizza, and I sat there and I played with them for a little bit. And I realized like, I need to start like making a move more into game development, because I've been a gamer my whole life, and working in the film industry, while it was fun and I had a blast, I wanted to kind of change things up a little bit and move into a different industry. So what happened was I cold called Infinity Ward, and after that, like the rest is history. I worked on Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, then eventually Modern Warfare 2. Here's me as a sniper in Call of Duty 4. Well, actually, that's a machine gunner. I'm a saw gunner in Modern Warfare 1. In multiplayer, I'm a sniper, a Marine Corps sniper, so I'm wearing a ball cap and I have a sniper rifle. So we made a lot of waves with Call of Duty 4. It was by far, even though I'm biased because I worked on it, but it was by far the first FPS title that I played on the console that pulled me off of the PC. Like for the majority of time, I was playing, on the PC, competitive, FPSs, and then once we started developing Call of Duty 4, I started playing it online. I just completely did away with the mouse and the keyboard and went purely on the sticks. So that was a blast working on that project. We eventually shipped Modern Warfare 2, and then after we shipped Modern Warfare 2, we started a studio. A bunch of us left Infinity Ward, and we started up a studio called Respawn Entertainment. And Respawn was founded in 2010, and it was 45 of senior developers coming from Infinity Ward. In 2010, a startup with a deep bench of talent that we had. It was an absolute blast. It was a whole lot of fun just thinking up what are we going to make? What are we going to do? We had no resources. We had to build everything, everything from data tables to reference material. We had to build everything from scratch. And even though we had a huge bench of game development talent, it was still super stressful. We just came off of the success of Modern Warfare 2. We left Infinity Ward, and then now we had this immense pressure to deliver the next big hit. And usually with startups and first titles, you're not going to do a hit with your first title. Usually that's what the data says. And some of us understood that. Some of us were like, well, we needed hits. We need to do something as hard hitting as Call of Duty is. So we were under immense pressure to figure out what game that we were making and what was it going to be. While we were building up the development team and the development process and the pipeline for our first title for Respawn Entertainment, I had to figure out a healthy way to where do I put my energy after I'm done working. What's a thing that I can balance this hard hitting stressful startup with. And I want to kind of just take a little sidestep to show that in addition to starting up a Respawn Entertainment, I picked up endurance racing, particularly Ironman. So while working hard and starting up a new studio and a new IP, on the side, I had to put this immense level of stress and put it somewhere positive. So, what better way to do it than really crazy and insane hardcore endurance racing? Is anyone here familiar with an Ironman? What the race is like and the distances involved? Okay, yeah. So that was something that I slowly like built up to while developing our first title at Respawn Entertainment. And since we started Respawn, I've completed 13 full distance Ironman races and multiple ultra marathons. I had to put the energy somewhere, right? And if this turned into something that was positive, which it did, I was all for it. So, work hard, play hard. Our first title was Titanfall 1. And then eventually we shipped Titanfall 2. And most recently we shipped Apex Legends in 2019. Working with the team at Respawn, it was, we had to show up, right? We had to show up every day for each other. It was a solid team of just very experienced and very talented professionals. I had to, show up at the top of my game every day along with everybody else. And in order for me to get to the end of that in a healthy way was to put, again, my energy somewhere healthy, right? And I hope that's something that resonates with you. If you're getting started in the industry, it's like what you do outside of work is just as important as what you do inside of work. So you have to think about what type of things you can do to supplement what it is that you're doing for work. How can you do something like healthy outside of it, healthy and positive? So, I look back at my time at Respawn. I was there for close to 13 years. I left there in 2023. But this is us at the Titanfall reveal at E3 2013. We built a full life-size Titan and put it right in the middle of E3, in the middle of the convention. And it was cool because like we had this studio out of Northern California build it, and we drove up from Los Angeles to close to the Bay Area where this thing was getting built, and we went to Home Depot and picked up a bunch of things like, I don't know if you could see here in the image, but there's like a bunch of these little like Nernies and Greebles that were added to this model. So we took a bunch of like props from Home Depot and started cutting them up and like painting them. And then with the production crew that was actually building this mech, this Titan, inside of this warehouse, we're slapping on like different details like bolts and screws and stuff. And it was really cool because it was in a warehouse. They had a bunch of like spotlights on it. So it was like you walked in and it's like we're building a mech. So it's pretty cool. This was like one of the happiest moments I've ever had because a lot of that hard work that we committed for Titanfall 1 was like just right there in the middle of E3. And this picture was awesome because we all crowded around it. We're buzzing because of all the accolades that we're getting for the reveal. But yeah, game development, it's a whole lot of fun when you have the right team. So let's change it up a little bit here. Let's move on to the day-to-day as a game artist, right? Like a game artist day-to-day is just basically, let's create art assets that can contribute to the tree or to a database that people can use to animate to, whatever. It's an asset that's used inside of the game. So what I have here is 3 different aspects of what a game artist does in a day. And it can be anything from concept and ideation to 3D modeling to getting those assets like concept art, ideation work, or 3D models, and then you check it in and you hand it off to other departments. The concept art and ideation, usually, let's start off with this is one of the models that I worked on for Apex. This is the Peacekeeper. Do you have any Apex players here? Does anybody play Apex? Somewhat. Has anybody used the Peacekeeper? Yeah. Okay. So you're aware of it. So this is what like early ideation for the Peacekeeper model looks like, or looked like. We wanted a shotgun that was energy based, and one of the awesome designers I was working with, Sean Slayback, who was my partner in crime for a lot of weapons. We were trying to think of like what would be a cool type of like energy-based shotgun that would have a type of like recognizable and remarkable action, sound, something unique that wasn't just, hey, let's give you just a regular standard run-of-the-mill shotgun. It's like, no, let's do a shotgun that is just very unconventional, but also just hits really hard. So we wanted to do something that was like something that was a break barrel, but then we ended up going with this lever action here, and the lever action just felt really good whenever we were like messing around with the animations. So with the lever action shotgun, we decided like, hey, let's make this a break barrel lever action battery operated shotgun, right? And through ideation, this rough timeline to develop like this concept took maybe about anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks and a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of feedback and review, and mostly was, does it fit the role of the type of weapon that we need for the balance table in the weapon pool that we have? Like that's one thing that we had to consider, right? So anything from a reload to a rack to aiming down the sights had to be balanced out with all of the other weapons that were in the weapon pool. So doing a lot of that work initially to figure out how effective it can be was super important. Then from there, we got the side profile roughly like worked out of how it would look like. Then we moved on to close to the finished concept, where with the finished concept, we want just a general idea of the size, the silhouette, the shape, somewhat material indication, and somewhat indication of how the action would work. And also right here, this is a little bit of how the weapon will look like in the view model position. This is generally something that I would deliver or give to an artist that was working on this particular gun. So from concept art and ideation, we would move on to 3D modeling. So the animator or the artist would get all this concept art, and then they would block it out into 3D and then start to apply the textures to it. A good thing about like having different perspectives of the weapon is that it gives the artist volume. So when they're actually building it in 3D, they can build out like, you know, how the shapes look like. And once you get something from 2D to 3D and you get it into the game, you know, it could have like some glaring discrepancies in terms of like functionality and stuff like that. So that's why it's super important just to, you know, keep in contact, not just with the concept artist that created the art, also keep in contact with the animators, with everybody up and down the chain, like animation, design, rigging, just to make sure that when you're creating this one particular asset, you're creating everything that fits within the game and it doesn't affect people, you know, up and down the pipeline, right? So, you know, with 3D modeling, I believe this model took somewhere between 3 to 4 weeks to build. If you're looking at like a character, sometimes characters can take roughly around the same time from 3 to 4 weeks, to main characters that sometimes will take anywhere between a month to 2 months. And if it's like, you know, a star character, sometimes it takes like 6 months. And that 6 months is iteration time. Like you think you get to a point where you get it close to finishing it, and then you have to make it, iterations that maybe take like months at a time to do. So, you know, timelines when it comes to 3D modeling, depending on how much information the artist has, can move a lot quicker. If it's like a quick and simple prop, it could take like, you know, a day to a week to complete. If it's a vehicle, a low resolution vehicle, someone can do that in maybe about a week, week and a half or so. If it's a high resolution drivable vehicle, like something you see in Forza, those things can take anywhere from like 2 months at a time, because they're modeling the engine, they're modeling workable suspension with IK, crazy stuff like that. So depending on the ask, depending on how detailed something can be, will also depend on how long it'll take for any particular model to be completed. So when it comes to like check-in and handoff, in particular with this asset that you see here, this asset would have to go to rigging. Rigging would attach the bones to all the working parts of the weapon, and then that would go to animation. And animation would already be like in a head start. They would take a head start by working on a proxy of the model. So the proxy would just be a basic block model of the working parts of the weapon. So they would get like the general animation set for hip fire, for ADS, for reloading. And then once they get the model, the actual finished model, then what they can do is they can apply that finished model, overwrite the proxy, and then now they have like, you know, the basic animation set up. And then they can start to fine tune the animation and, you know, turn it into a much more characterized and refined like final model that you see in the game. So let's talk a little bit about how artists work with programmers. So yeah, you know, first off, it just comes down to understanding each discipline, right? So me being an artist, I can talk about it. Art, yeah, it's a creative professional who shapes the visual elements of video games, essentially. Somebody who creates assets, right? It could be a 2D asset, it could be a 3D asset, it could be an animation set, effects, whatever. And here are some of the responsibilities, right? So you have a hard surface modeler. Hard surface does weapons, character or weapons, vehicles, props, spaceships, buildings. A character artist is much more specialized. They usually deal with organics like creatures, like view model hands, faces. Sometimes you have people that will just model heads and faces. Yeah, I worked with the guy who did the majority of the characters for the Final Fantasy movie, and all he did was characters' heads, and he's a complete master at it, right? So he would just create heads and just create a library of heads, and we just throw those on like different bodies. So it was cool. Like, this is way before we had a metahuman. So he was our like own personal metahuman. With environment can handle anything from organics externally and internally to hard surface objects, in like internal sets or external sets. They basically build the world that a lot of these characters and props live in. So anything from the skybox to like the background, that's what environment artists usually do. Prop artists are usually attached to environment or hard surface teams, because they're creating like all the little tiny things that you see on a desk, like a cup or a gun on the table, like little things that you see in the world. Sometimes you just buy a library, like with Unreal, you can just get stuff on the library, and usually a prop artist goes through and creates that. A lot of that stuff is starting to become automated, with different AI tools. But then again, like mostly everything has been modeled in the world. So I'm pretty sure you can find a model of something. Normally what happens is a prop artist will get like these tiny props and then populate the world with it, working with an environment artist. I have here key art, because key art also applies to concept art. I should put concept art up there. But concept art is basically someone who sketches or creates like finished concepts of art, and that's usually what forms the basis. They usually address like size, shape, silhouette, theme, color, things that are just very front end when it comes to creating art. Usually a concept artist or a key artist will go in and establish that set. And then you have like UI and UIX. So it's user interface, which is like all the menus, the animations, the transitions and stuff that you see from menu to menu. Those are usually tied with a design team that will create a system. UIX is generally they're developers who create the experience, right? So what does it feel like when you hit start or you press play and you jump into a game, right? That's somebody who works very closely usually with UI, but UIX is somebody who's making sure that the quality control is there. And then we have visual effects. Obviously, visual effects, they're the people who, make things explode. They put in muzzle flash. They put in like, different spells coming from fingertips and things like that. There's a lot of responsibilities here. I purposely left out animation because you can go into a lot of specific types of animation. But with art, this is generally like the core responsibilities for what the teams generally understand for artists. So specialties specifically can be concept, 3D modeling, and visual effects. So when it comes to programmers, like you find people here. A programmer is a software engineer that specializes in the creation of video games. So that's writing and implementing code, it's developing systems, it's debugging, which is a huge part of it. Debugging and QC is huge, and optimization, right? So debugging, QC, and optimization, you can kind of lump those into one thing, right? You can build anything, but it needs to be good, right? That's where people like you come into play. So specialties can range from gameplay engineers to AI to graphics engineers who figure out like the different types of lighting scenarios and materials and shaders and things like that, to writing tools that help internally the development team work much more efficiently. And then networking engineers that handle like lag online or spooling of servers and stuff like that. So I have here communication is key, right? And this is in particular with art. Has everybody here seen Grandma's Boy? Yeah, that's where this image is from. And I think you should watch it if you're getting into game development. It's a little dated, it's really corny and cheesy, but it is pretty hilarious when it comes to game development. Because whenever I tell somebody, oh, I work on video games, then sometimes someone will go, oh, like the movie Grandma's Boy. And it's like, no, not like the movie Grandma's Boy, but this is a good explanation of what a lot of art departments look like. So communication is key with art. These are things that will give artists and engineers like success in communication with engineering. And number one for me, I think, is engaging in technical discussions from the concept phase to understanding limitations and opportunities for the particular asset that they're creating. So while we walk through like the concept phase, I think during the concept phase, if you pull in an engineer that understands the art making process, having that engineer and kind of like being a sounding board and touch base with them as to if something is actually achievable inside of the game engine, I think that's super important. Having a relationship with an artist and an engineer early on is very powerful, because they can either verify or push back against an a feature or an initiative that just sounds completely ridiculous or realistic, right? I think it's good to get in touch with an engineer whenever we had like something crazy with art. We wanted to make sure that it was actually feasible. Number two, and this is a big one, and I think it's super important, especially when some of you are engineers, standardizing nomenclature and naming conventions. Like, I think overall, just in general, developers are just all over the place. They want to name something like main hole 001, 002, 003, and you can't even tell, like, is this somebody's hand? Is this a mouth? Like, is this a dragon's, like, talon? You can't tell. Like, naming conventions are super important, because up and down the line, engineers like yourselves are going to be developing systems that are going to call these specific types of assets. And if art is well informed and they understand what the naming conventions are for a particular asset they're creating, it'll make everyone's life easier. So I think having discussions overall, like, what is a sword? Does a sword have a hilt? Does it have a handle? Does it have a blade? Cool. If it's just one model, then that's a discussion that needs to be had, right? And that's an understanding that you can take when an artist is creating an asset and it gets into the hands of an engineer or an animator. Everyone has an understanding of what that asset is. And then number three, in particular, this is a big one when it comes to art. It's be open to constructive criticism and understand that iteration is a natural part of development, and it needs to be focused on problem solving. So, with artists and with developers in general, it can get very emotional, right? Because somebody is working on one particular thing for like months at a time. It's, their baby. And if someone comes in and says, oh, this is not going to work for the game, maybe that particular person that's been working on that thing is thinking like, oh, this is going to be the most amazing thing that can just immediately work in the game. They just probably didn't even think about like how many polys it takes to get that checked in. Maybe you're over budget in the game. These are things that are worth considering. So when it comes to criticism and it comes to accepting feedback, that feedback can't just be simply, this thing sucks and we can't use it. It has to be, hey, this thing is expensive. Maybe we should look at reducing it, right? And there's a difference between that type of feedback. So if it's coming from a place of problem solving, I think that goes over really well. Next up is communication with programmers. Like, so communication with art and programming. This is what I've seen a lot of success in working with a lot of engineers. Involving artists early on to ensure the creative vision is technically feasible and to provide context on technical requirements. So touching base again on that first topic that I brought up in the earlier slide, I think is super important. If there's a crazy feature that, in your mind's eye, in your engineering eye, you think looks cool, partnering with somebody who makes something look awesome for a living is probably a good idea, because that way you can focus on how the feature can actually play, how it can actually like work on the back end. And then if you have like somebody who is like full-time working on making it look cool, that's a very powerful combination. I mean, if you could do it yourself too, that's fine. But game development is a team effort, right? So if you're able to focus your time on the things that you're good at, then like knowing how to ask for help and knowing when to include help early on is very important. Again, number 2, provide clear documented naming conventions and folder structures. Sometimes when it comes to working with artists, sometimes they'll have the capacity to put together a valid naming convention, but they can't jump into your head and think like, okay, the systems that you're going to create can apply to this naming convention. So most of the time, I would leave it to engineers to say, hey, tell me what you need in terms of creating a naming convention and a folder structure, and we'll adhere to it, right? Because I want to be able to make sure that when an engineer is working on something art related, I want to make sure that I'm making their life easier and vice versa. I want them to dictate, okay, this is the thing that you're going to do. We're going to make sure to back you up on it. And I think that's been successful for myself and working with engineers in the past. It's like, yo, why don't you figure out, like, tell me how to make your life easier and I'll make the best art I can. And let me hand it over to you so you can do the best work that you can. That's usually a good relationship to have. And then last, again, feedback, right? Provide specific, actionable feedback on art assets. Explaining technical reasons for requested changes and avoid vague comments. So in the past, I've run into this a lot, which an artist will say, well, this code sucks. And then an engineer will come back and say, well, this art sucks. It's like, that doesn't help anything, guys. Like, we need to come together and figure out, like, why does it suck? Or what is the expectation of that one thing and why am I not getting it, right? So avoiding vague comments is super important. Like, don't just say something sucks. Just say like, hey, this thing doesn't work for me or for the engine because of this. Have we tried this thing, right? I think that's much more powerful and that gets the point across better. So working together as a development team, right? Coming together as a team, it's a lot of communication, right? You schedule regular brief sync ups, just touch base one-on-ones, like 10, 15 minute, hey, this is what I worked on. What do you think? Right. And it's like having that type of like constant communication, it just makes sure that, you know, things are buttoned up and there's alignment between the development team. So yeah, daily stand-ups, weekly check-ins is good. You know, it's good just to touch base and discuss progress, blockers, and upcoming tasks. Some people need like an everyday stand-up. Some people need a week. Sometimes people can go 2 weeks depending on the project. But I think having like some type of stand-up where there's like information that's being disseminated or there's like a back and forth discussion about like course correction on a particular asset, I think that's something important to have. Establish a feedback loop where assets are reviewed against technical and artistic expectations. Like, it's good, you know, during these regular sync ups just to touch base and like, you know, look at the art or look at like the placeholder system that's being engineered or being developed. It's good just to touch base and just like show people. It's dumb to do grand reveals. I think a lot of people like to like surprise and wow people with grand reveals. But in game development, it's an iterative process. So you want people to understand that things are just being slowly built over the course of time. If a grand reveal happens, like, it better be damn good. But usually with a grand reveal, it's like, oh, that looks awesome, but you know, how expensive is it? That's usually the question, or what's really wrong with it. And usually that type of question is asked when there isn't a lot of communication that's going on from developers, you know, with each other. Documenting agreed upon asset delivery pipelines and quality standards, like putting together what are your specifications and requirements for that particular asset. You know, for that gun that we shared earlier, I would give to you engineers, like, here are the poly counts, here are the vert counts, and here are the materials that I want to work with. These are the shaders that are going to go onto it. These are the amount of animations that are going to be applied to this particular thing. And then the question for you guys is, how would this fit in memory? And how can I make this fit in memory that you've allocated for that one particular asset? Like, that's what I would do working with an engineer. So anything that you can do on the engineering side to set up an artist for success, like, hey, stick within these parameters, would be super helpful. And it would also give them insight when they're making the particular thing to be as efficient as possible. So with both, using a shared bug tracking or task management system to log feedback and track iterations on assets. So Jira, Bugzilla, just, have Confluence, have something where you can track the iteration. You can go back to different changes. I mean, that's super important. And finally, it's just connecting with like artists and connecting with other developers. Like, try to understand their workflow, right? Communicate with them, understand the workflow through like attending workshops. Be curious, like ask questions like, hey, how'd you make that thing, right? Can you show me how that's made? And usually what people will do is that when they're passionate about what they do, they're also passionate about sharing the information with it. So if there's an artist that's really curious about engineering some of the programming that you guys are doing, it's like, how do you guys figure out the code for some of this stuff, right? Like, it's that type of a relationship when you're sharing information and you understand each other's process only contributes to better development. So communication, one-on-ones, and if you're in the same town, like, yeah, get lunch, get coffee. That's something that really adds to a lot of success. So yeah, that's the end of the deck. That's pretty much all the stuff that I wanted to chat with you all here, and we have roughly about 10 minutes for Q&A. So